GP fans community, welcome to this video. We've had two races in this Formula One season, two McLaren wins, some spectacular Verstappen performances, and two George Russell podiums. He's been one of the most surprisingly impressive drivers this season, but I'm joined by Nicholas to describe and to talk about the first two races of the season. How you doing, man?
I'm doing very well. Yeah, we're coping with these extremely early races, aren't we? But no, there's been a lot to talk about. There've been good races. Maybe the race itself in China not as much, but a lot to talk about, which is the most important thing for what we're doing now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing, because at the end of the Chinese Grand Prix, it was a bit like, oh, what was the story? Was it the Verstappen tire management? Was it I don't know, Antonelli's driver of the day? Or was it the McLaren one too? Lando Norris managing to manage that brake issue and taking the car home. You had to kind of scramble to figure out what you wanted to talk about. But then after you get the three disqualifications, the two Ferraris, and that creates it creates the content for people like us, which was brilliant. Not for me, at least, brilliant. But I've been happy with the season so far. We got one more early race of these first three. Japan next. 6 a.m, not as bad as the Australia 4 a.m, but we've got this, and we will get our normal sleeping patterns very soon. We will get our weekend lie-ins very soon. That's the key thing.
Well, I mean, then we'll have the Miami Grand Prix, which is the other way around, isn't it? Then it'll be very late. So, yeah, I guess morning people and night people everyone gets their race, I guess. Everyone gets their fill.
Maybe that's what they were trying to do, just get rid of all the awkward ones. And then right at the end of the season, we then have Las Vegas on a Saturday at 4 a.m. So, yeah, can't really win. But let's start off with, I mean, the biggest story out of the Chinese Grand Prix. And there's nowhere else to start other than the fact that Ferrari are joint fourth for the Constructors' Championship with Williams because of a double disqualification. At the end of the Chinese Grand Prix, Ferrari, despite having what was an underwhelming Sunday after Lewis Hamilton winning on Saturday, they could have said, we've left China with more points than everybody but McLaren. But no longer the case now. They only scored, what was it? Lewis scored 8 points in the sprint race. Charles Leclerc would have scored 4 or 5, I believe. I can't really remember where he finished. But that's all they leave with. And unfortunately, it was due to just pure negligence and team error. They've said they didn't account for the idea of Charles Leclerc doing a one-stop and that effect that might have on weight. And Lewis Hamilton's ride height is what was compromised, realistically, is the most likely cause of his plank wear. If you look back at Australia, Charles Leclerc kind of hinted at the start of this weekend that the reason their performance dropped off so much in Australia from Friday to Saturday was because of a change in ride height, and the issues that they did see when Leclerc was fastest throughout Friday and then nowhere on Saturday were consistent with the changing of ride height. So maybe between Saturday and Sunday, they've made adjustments to Lewis's car, unfortunately not paid into account the idea of the wear it could have on the plank, and it's lost him some points as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking it up while you were speaking. They've scored 12 points, so 4 for Leclerc and 8 for Hamilton in the sprints. But yeah, it's still not an ideal weekend for Ferrari. What Leclerc said after the race, also why he didn't come in to replace his front wing, because he clipped it obviously with Hamilton at the start, is because the Ferrari, at least in race trim, was not good in head-to-head combat, shall we say. Leclerc said especially in turn 12, so we're getting really visual on an audio platform now, but turn 12 is the left-hand turn before where the DRS detection point is, before that long right-hander that leads onto the back straight in China. And he said that in turn 12, the Ferrari was really poor. Even with a complete front wing. And that meant, anyway, that the Ferrari could never catch a car in front by the time you get to that hairpin, which is why he chose to have track position over coming in for a pit stop, drop in positions, but being quicker. And I think that might be the reason why, especially Hamilton looked so good in the sprint, because he wasn't fighting with anyone. He was, I mean, they were even saying it on F1 TV that he was dominating, which he was. He won by almost 7 seconds. But Leclerc was down in 5th and he was catching Russell a little bit by the end, but wasn't making too much of an impression. I think apparently that had to do with specific setup and specific characteristics of that SF25 that apparently didn't handle those slow corners well. That's interesting. I mean, and I guess that puts a big task, if this is going to be a theme of the Ferraris not being good in slow corners and maybe not being good in wheel-to-wheel combat. I guess that puts an omen on, or it puts a big task on Leclerc and Hamilton to qualify really well, doesn't it? Hamilton did his thing on Friday in China, putting it on pole, surprising everyone, including himself. And he dominated on Saturday, but then in the race he kind of was nowhere. I'm sure that all our listeners will have heard by now, rather, that whole radio thing of when it sounded like Hamilton didn't want to let Leclerc pass. Actually, it was Hamilton who first suggested to let Leclerc pass rather than it being sort of forced upon him, which is an odd choice by the FOM to leave that bit out, which is very fair for Ferrari to be upset about that. But all of that to say, the Ferrari has really high highs, but clearly some things to work on. They're better than they are now in the standings. You know, I'd say they're a little bit quicker than the Williams, but still, when the championship will be as close as it looks like it could be, you can't afford to be at a double disqualification in a race like this, man. Not at all.
And it's so rare to see both drivers from one team get disqualified. I mean,
for different reasons as well.
Yeah, exactly that. For different reasons, and both being what the team has called a misjudgment by the team, just not taking into account something. And that's what's poor. And this season, we all said it's going to be close. We all said it's going to come down to the small margins, and Ferrari have left off. They've left some huge points in China, and that's the issue. I mean, there's also the fact that is 2 races now where, I mean, in Australia, it was very small, but it's 2 races where Hamilton and Leclerc have made contact. Yeah. That's the other interesting thing about it. Obviously, this one, unfortunately for Leclerc, he did lose his front wing, and I do think that Verstappen's time management was impeccable, but I do think the fact that Leclerc was having to compensate significantly in the way he was driving, and he probably would have been putting a lot more strain on his tires because of the lack of the front wing end plate. By the end of the race, his tires were finished. They were shot. He was so off the pace. If there were a couple more laps, Hamilton would have overtaken him again. So I think it really did compromise him. And I think he was very dejected from as soon as the first lap ended, because I think in his head, he saw his pace and he genuinely, despite the Ferrari legitimately being terrible at overtaking in that race, like they could not get past anybody down that straight. He felt like with the pace that he had, he could have challenged for a lot more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And they should be challenging for a lot more. We're heading into Japan now, into Suzuka. Very interesting to see how the Ferrari will deal with that circuit. It has, obviously has the S's at the start. It has that hairpin, and it has, you've got 130R, you've got the spoon corners. It's got quite a couple of corners that, at least in current trim, it looks like it wouldn't be favorable to the Ferrari. And it's also, of course, a very high tire deg circuit. And that should play into the hands of McLaren, who seem to have this this tire whispering car, a car that's very good on tires. And you'd think that at a circuit like Suzuka, that would come out more than anything. And I mean, they looked the strongest car by far on Sunday. Despite Norris's brakes just not working by the end. So let's see if that goes into Japan as well, because honestly, Lando, especially Lando's playing down the dominance of that MCL 39, but my goodness, that looks like it is the best car by quite some way, doesn't it? In race pace anyway, and in the hands of Oscar Piastri as well, who drove an impeccable, like a perfect no notes race in China.
No, Oscar Piastri's win in China was absolutely fantastic. It was one of those where you know someone's had a very good race when you barely see them on the TV.
Yeah.
Oscar Piastri just drove a fantastic race, managed it well. Lando Norris never really imposed himself on him. I think there were times where he wanted to, but Oscar really managed the gap well. And by the time that Lando actually did want to, he started to have the brake issue. He had taken off like 4/10 of Piastri in like the first two sectors of a lap, and then going into the hairpin, his 14, his brakes finished, and then he had to manage it the rest of the way. But Piastri was class. I do agree with you. I think the issue with the other teams, I think we're going to likely see a qualifying session like Australia, where Leclerc and Verstappen matched Norris all the way till turn 11. Turn 11's the start of the very slow parts of the fight. So after you do the fast left right sweep, that's 9, 10. Turn 11's at the end of the third DRS straight. So from that point onwards, Leclerc lost 6/10 to Norris.
Yeah, wow.
Because of his tires being completely destroyed by the end of the lap. If the other cars are not able to hang on to their tires throughout an entire lap of Suzuka, they're going to be finished by the McLarens, which seem to just be so kind on their tires. And like you said, I think Norris is trying to take a lot more credit for the performances as opposed to their car. And I like that George Russell is, I think, playing mind games with him, constantly referencing the car. I really, really do like that, because I do think that Loki did play a factor in Norris's performances on Saturday. That was a bonus take. Maybe I'll get to that in a second. But I think the McLaren should look dominant in Japan, but it's a place that's been dominated by Verstappen lately. So he can always guarantee that he will be decent there, regardless of how that car looks. So maybe, and what, is this the last time it's going to be Red Bull and Honda there properly as a thing as well? So maybe Red Bull and Honda have something special for them here. I don't know, but I would expect the McLaren to be dominant, because it will be the best car, especially in race trim, because, I mean, Australia, they looked insane until they went off and let Verstappen back into it. This weekend, George Russell, the nearest non-McLaren, was like 11 seconds away from Piastri. So it's comfy for them.
Yeah. No, it is. And just reference to what you were saying so that people know as well. So what George Russell said is that the McLaren should win every race of this season, and that it's more dominant than any Red Bull's ever been. And that obviously includes 2023, when Verstappen won 19 of 22 races, when Red Bull won 21 of 22 races, which is it's historically the most dominant car of all time, statistically. So to say that is, I mean, I think Russell's going too far one way and Lando's going too far the other way. Lando's trying to sort of take away credit from the car, and Russell is sort of piling on pressure onto Norris via the car, which is it's quite an interesting bit of mind games, obviously, between the two of them. And it's also interesting, you know, I always think back in times like this to during the COVID season when Lando Norris, when he was asked about Lewis Hamilton, saying that it's not impressive because he should be winning every race in that car. He is only racing against two other cars. You always think back to those kind of things and think, oh, that is just aged like milk, hasn't it? When Lando is making mistakes in qualifying, when he is struggling for pace in the sprints, and sounding so downbeat on the radio during the sprints as well. The race could no fault of his own. The brake issue at the end, he was lucky that it happened at the end and not like Alonso where it happened at the start, because it seemed like a very similar issue. But yeah, I'm not a fan of this. I don't want to call it hypocrisy. Maybe that's too big of a word, but I don't like, you know, when it's someone else who dominates. It just makes you come across a little bit bitter. You know what I mean? And I think Lando's better than that. And I think he doesn't mean all of that, what he says. And maybe he's but it's taken out of context a little bit. But I think by now, you know, he's been in the sport so long, he should know a bit better.
I feel like someone should just ask him, like, okay, so now you're in the best car. How do you feel about those comments that you made back then?
Straight up, I agree. I'd love it if someone just asked them straight up.
Because, like, I guess the best teacher is experience. So You now understand what it takes. You know, he's going to come up to a year of having the best car in Formula One very soon. Now you've had that experience, you know what it takes to, it's not just easy to just win, regardless of how good your car is, the consistency it takes to constantly go out there and get those performances. Do you agree with what you said about Lewis in 2020?
I mean, he did say it 5 years ago, so you know he
Yeah.
was a sophomore. Then you can let him have it, I guess.
Yeah. But I think the one thing that I do want to say about McLaren is, I mean, you called it from the start of the season when we talked about the predictions. Oscar Piastri. I do think a lot of people did just instantly write off him as a title challenger and kind of just said, if McLaren are going to win the Drivers' Championship, it's going to be Lando Norris. But his teammate, I think, could easily be joint on points with him at this point in the season if it wasn't for some significant misfortune in Australia. And I think they're going to be very, 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 they're going to be battling a lot this week, this season, and they might be there. That might end up being our title challenge, them two and Verstappen. Honestly,
Yeah.
it might genuinely be our title battle, and that would be absolute cinema. It'd be interesting to see how McLaren handle that. In fact, let me take that back, because if he had finished second in Australia, he would be leading the championship right now because he finished ahead of Lando in the sprint.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's that. It could be a very, very good battle between them two, and I want to see how their partnership would handle that, because I think that is something that we may see the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, he's won 13 points on Lando in China. He obviously was 23 points behind him after Australia, finishing ninth, and Lando winning the race, and he's back down to 10 points now on him after China. Yeah. No, I mean it's hardly a hot take to say Piastri is an amazing driver, because he is, and if you followed him before F1, you know that he's like one of the best prospects in recent memory. But the one knock on Piastri in his entire career is that he doesn't start seasons well, and now he's won the second race of the season. He was until what happened in Australia. He was having a real crack at the win in Australia as well. If we get this version from Piastri the whole year round, he is beating Norris. If this is what we get from Piastri, if this is an actual marker from Piastri, he is beating Norris this year, because he just doesn't make mistakes. Even in his rookie year, he was barely making mistakes. Yes, he was being beaten by Lando comprehensively, but what you see from rookies, and we have seen a lot of rookie instances this season already, because we have quite a lot of them. Rookies make mistakes, but Piastri is such a cool customer. He just doesn't do it. And that is, Verstappen proved it last year. Just putting the car on par or even better than that is what wins you championships, not to win races, not the sort of podium or DNF mentality.
Big highs, big lows, big highs, big lows do not win you championships. It's the constant good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is what I said back in, this was a long time ago already, but in 2018, when Ricciardo won, Vettel, Hamilton, and Ricciardo, all three of them won 2 of the first 6 races, right? So Ricciardo won China and Monaco. But Ricciardo, I think, didn't podium for the rest of the year. He only had those 2 wins, and then maybe podium at the end of the season. But Ricciardo was such a 10 or 2 out of 10 sort of, well, that's maybe a bit exaggerated, but he is, that lack of consistency is why I already said back then, Verstappen is better than him if you really look at it. If you strip away these 2 wins, Verstappen is absolutely smoking him. And that, it's not really a one-on-one comparison, but I have a little bit of the same kind of feeling now with Piastri and Norris this season, because Norris has already made a couple of mistakes. Piastri, the thing in Melbourne, I'd hardly call it a mistake. It's just unfortunate.
Conditions. Yeah.
So I'm so intrigued, and I'm doubling down on that. I honestly think that Piastri might win the title. I know I said in my preseason prediction it would be Leclerc, but I did say that Piastri would beat Norris. And now that we know McLaren has the best car, Piastri is the world champion this year. Calling it now. 22 races to go. Definitely no recency bias here. You know what I mean?
That caught me off guard. That actually completely caught me off guard. No, I I have to join you on the side of Piastri beating Norris. I did say that. I think I said that Norris would finish third behind Verstappen and Leclerc. But I do want to change that to Piastri beating Norris, because I always kind of had this idea that I did think Piastri had the higher ceiling than Lando Norris. I just didn't know if he had ascended past Lando Norris yet, because, like I said, last season I did just feel quite disappointed in Piastri, especially the qualifying. But the fact that through these first two races, he has been right there with Norris in qualifying. In fact, in China, of course, he started ahead. So I think with that, his first pole of his career as well. Congratulations.
Yeah.
With that, that's helped me feel the confidence for him. And if he is constantly second or first, we know, or even third, we know Lando does struggle with his starts. There's no guarantee that Lando's going to be ahead of him by the end of the first lap. And if he's there to put on his pressure, we know Piastri, if in my opinion, is the more cutthroat driver. When it comes to it, if he's told to stay behind Lando, he might not do it. He might. When it comes to stuff like that, I genuinely think that Piastri will be the one, and I think he is in the team the future world champion. If they had one of them, I think it is him. Surprisingly for me, I genuinely think after watching these two races, the person I think is going to win the championship is Max Verstappen.
Really?
Sunday, in my opinion, was an absolute masterclass by him. You saw him not on TV at all till he caught up with Leclerc, but his tire management, it was ridiculous. He was significantly quicker than absolutely everybody on track by the end of the race. Lewis Hamilton pitted, had to lap at over a second faster than him to catch up with him. He couldn't even get to a second quicker than him. And by the end of the race, Verstappen was the quicker driver. He was fantastic. And when the thing with Verstappen, the thing that differentiates him from everybody else on the grid right now is how he can turn what should be an 8th place, a 9th place into a 4th place, into a 2nd place at Australia. He can turn races that should not be podiums, while his teammates qualifying 20th and 18th, and while his teammates struggle, it was getting overtaken by Haas's, crossing the line 15th, but getting promoted to 12th or 13th, whatever it was for Liam Lawson. It is absolutely brilliant that Verstappen is there a minute ahead of him and battling for nearly podiums or getting on the podium. And I just do feel that there are going to be days where other drivers really do struggle and miss out on podiums, maybe DNF because of mistakes, have really bad qualifyings. But Max Verstappen's going to constantly be within that top 4, top 5, regardless of what his car can do. Like Singapore last season. Shouldn't have been second. The car was not fit to finish second last season in Singapore, but he knew he needed to minimize the amount of damage he lost to Lando Norris, and he did.
Yeah, no, he did. You know how old the last time Max finished a race and finished outside of the podium? You know how old he was? He was 18, and he turns 28 this year. Like he absolutely always maximizes the results, and even when he has like the worst weekend imaginable, think Hungary last year, Singapore 2023, which obviously was he finished 5th, I think, in the end. But even when he's having like everything's going wrong, he still gives you a P5, a P4, a P6, like ruthless consistency. And speaking of Max, by the way, what I did enjoy, and what we didn't see enough of last year, is when Hamilton was on pole with the sprints. At the start, the way he chopped off Max instantly. That is how you do it. That is like just slamming that door in his face. Basically, that was how you do it. That was one of my favorite moments of the weekend, because obviously Hamilton must be getting these like sort of flashbacks. No, but that was great. But I agree. I mean, what else can be said about Max, man? He's just these. It's kind of like watching someone like Steph Curry or LeBron James or any great athlete in any sport. You kind of get so used to how good he is that you forget just how unbelievably high the bar he's setting for himself and for his teammate, who, shall we say, is not having the best time of it, is he?
No. Just one more thing on Max. He got outscored by Lando Norris across this weekend by 1 point.
Yeah.
That's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Liam Lawson is having a really tough time. And I think it's unfortunate. The Red Bull is clearly a very difficult car to drive, which is obviously playing a part in it. But he's also not giving himself any excuses. He acknowledges that his car is a hard car to drive, but he says he should be doing better. I mean, seeing Ollie Behrman, even though Ollie Behrman was on fresher tires, Ollie Behrman getting past him and stuff like that, I just feel like you should never see a Haas getting past a
No.
Red Bull unless you're in a completely different dimension. But obviously there's talks about him being replaced by Yuki Tsunoda. I think that's the key thing because, I mean, 18th, 20th, and 20th in qualifying, he's yet to make it out of Q1. That is very poor. But I worry because I do feel that if you put in Yuki in that car, he probably would struggle. Max Verstappen flirted with the idea that the RB was the quicker car out of the two, which is insane to even think about. And I think for Liam, it's a bit unfortunate because the first two races are two races he's never raced at, two circuits he's never raced at.
Yeah.
Red Bull would look very, very bad to one, when they made the decision to get Tsunoda. I get that a lot of people understood the fact that maybe Lawson's cool head would be better next to Verstappen as opposed to the fierce Yuki. And there was kind of rumors of Verstappen not being very keen on being teammates with Yuki. And I mean, Yuki's contract's done at the end of the season. Honda are gone. Is Yuki going to be gone? Is there point having him a Red Bull for just one season? There's all these elements of it, but a lot of people thought that the decision was wrong. And a lot of people thought that Yuki, who beat Lawson head to head last season, should deserve the call up. So now it's going to be a very expensive mistake if they then now decide to push Lawson down to RB and move Yuki up to Red Bull. Also, it would be a bit unfortunate for Lawson to get two races. He's finally going to have a circuit that he's very familiar with, and he doesn't even get a chance to perform there. I think it would be pretty unfortunate for him to not get the chance there, to at least try the Suzuka circuit.
I mean, let's unpack this. So Lawson has had, no two ways about it. He's had an absolutely catastrophic start to the season. Out in Q1 every session, P20 in both qualifying sessions in China. But like you said, two circuits he's never driven at before. And like you hinted at again, lest we forget that Lawson has driven in Super Formula in Japan. So he is very, very familiar with Suzuka. So if you're Red Bull and if you're already, which is, I think, embarrassing from their half, it just shows that you've made the wrong decision. But if you are already thinking of dropping him, I'd say at least give him Suzuka, because if he's not going to perform at Suzuka, a track he should know inside out, that could be a real sort of sign of concern. But there are other factors at play here as well. I saw F1 Insider, which is this German outlet. They had the story on that Verstappen was quite upset with Red Bull, and not specifically that Lawson would be dropped for Tsunoda if that happens. That's not the bit he's upset with, but rather he's upset with the engineers that they cannot make a car, they cannot develop a car that can be driven on the limit by both drivers, but rather just by him. We know that Max likes his cars extremely front-loaded, extremely pointy, as it's called. So super, super sensitive, shall we say. So really loose rear end, especially on corner entry, which saps confidence from anyone. If you're turning into a corner, the back end steps out. Obviously, you can't attack the corner the same way. Max loves it like that because he likes driving cars on the absolute knife's edge. But I think there is really something to what he says, that you can't just develop a car for me. And this is not a Lawson problem. It's not a Albon, Gasly, Perez problem. This is a problem that, you're developing a car for my needs, which is fine, but it cannot just work for me. It's not Max Verstappen racing, it's Red Bull racing. So he is right in thinking that the problem doesn't go away if, Tsunoda is now going to drive this extremely pointy, sensitive car. And let's, credit to Yuki. He's had a heck of a start to the season. Like, he's been absolutely lights out. I'd say he might be one of the three best drivers so far of the season.
Been robbed
But
of 2 points finishes as well by his own
yeah,
team.
his strategy got completely screwed up in Australia, and obviously he had that really weird front wing failure in China when he was running comfortably inside of the points as well. Something else that Max said, which is true as well, is that if you take Lawson out of the car now, obviously you just destroy his career, don't you? If you take someone out of a car after 2 races, like that is just
F1's a confidence sport.
Yeah, it is a confidence sport. And at least give him, I'd say at least do the same as Doohan, which is a different story, obviously, but he, by all accounts, has a 6-race contract. So basically until Miami. So before we head into the European leg of the calendar, at least give him that, I'd say. But Suzuka is a huge, huge weekend for Liam Lawson.
I completely agree. And I think the issue with the Lawson getting dropped thing is this element. If they drop Liam Lawson to RB, you have to ask kind of like, is there a point in dropping him to RB? Because it'll be similar to the Gasly issue. It'll be similar to what Gasly experienced, where it was like, are you ever going to go back to Red Bull? So if not, what's the point of us having you in RB? Is the point now, if you're done with Red Bull and you go down to the junior team, if you're not going to kind of progress back to the senior team, would they not just prefer to get Arvin Lindblad, even though maybe they do want him to finish his season in Formula 2, get more experience before jumping up to Formula 1? But if he's not going to have a future there, unless they do want to help him develop to go to another team eventually, the junior driver programs are not just to create talent for your team, it's to create talent for Formula 1, of course. But for Red Bull specifically, is there a point keeping him at RB for the rest of the season? What would that benefit them if they think selfishly?
Yeah, no, I agree. And we've seen it before. We've seen it twice before, I want to say. Yeah. So we've seen it first with obviously with Daniel Kvyat, who was replaced by Max Verstappen in 2016 after his home Grand Prix as well in Russia. The famous, no, that wasn't the torpedo moment. Actually, that was China. And then which was completely unfair, by the way. That was a completely fair move from Kvyat, and Vettel just had to go at it. But I digress. The second time was obviously Gasly in 2019. Gasly would take P2 at Brazil later that year in the Toro Rosso, which is one of the coolest moments in recent memory. But like you said, no, that is the key point. What, as if you're Liam Lawson and you get dropped from Red Bull back to V-Carb now, to Racing Bulls, what is the point of you being in the program? Because the end goal of the program is to make it to Red Bull Racing, to that first team. If you get dropped, you'd have to do something absolutely extraordinary to get another promotion. He'd have to take podiums, or he'd have to win a race or something. He had to do something absolutely mental. And Gasly did do both of those things, by the way. He did win a race with AlphaTauri and he got a podium with Toro Rosso, and he still ended up leaving anyway. So yeah, if you drop Lawson now, what's the point? That is, I think, the main takeaway. Is the juice and the juice being promoting Yuki Tsunoda worth the squeeze? And that is destroying Liam Lawson's career.
And the fact is that if they do drop Liam Lawson, do they end up needing 2 new drivers next season? Because the assumption is that Yuki will be leaving Red Bull. Maybe dropping Lawson changes that all, but the idea is, that's the main thought right now, Yuki will be leaving the Red Bull kind of circle. So if they drop Lawson and they drop Yuki, do they need to replace Yuki? Do they need to replace Lawson as well next season? Who would they bring in to replace both of them? It might just give them more of a task next season, which would be a bit of an interesting one. But I think the one person I do actually, just before we end off, talk about is George Russell, because he's got 2 P3s. He's been absolutely fantastically consistent. He's been brilliant, maximizing what he could get out of that Mercedes. 2 great qualifying sessions. We always know George is very good in qualifying, and it seems like he is making sure Mercedes have no growing pains without Lewis Hamilton. He has stepped right into that lead driver role, performing very well. Obviously, Antonelli had a brilliant Australian Grand Prix. The driver of the day that even shocked him at China. So I guess Mercedes have been very good, very strong start to the season for Mercedes, and I think they can be very happy with how the first two races have gone.
Absolutely. No, George Russell has been he has been absolutely impeccable so far. He's done nothing wrong. He hasn't set a foot wrong. He's been bang on the pace. You know, we were all kind of, when Piastri beat Norris in qualifying, we all kind of penciled in like, okay, that's it. And then suddenly, you know, Russell almost takes pole position away from Piastri. No, it was a mega lap, another great race from Russell, who almost caught Norris there at the end as well because of that brake issue. This is what Toto Wolff was hoping for. You know, they have really, a lot of credit has to go to Mercedes for the way they have developed and nurtured and cared for George Russell, first at Williams, slowly, couple years there, waiting for that opportunity as well. Credit to Russell as well, by the way, for not, because that Williams, you know, was absolutely nowhere. He'd have the weekend of his life and he'd be P12 or P13 and the odd point here or there. He could have easily left for another team as well. He must have seen the writing on the wall at some points that Bottas was going to leave. He was banking on that for sure, but he drove three seasons at Williams, and as one of the biggest prospects in F1 at a team that was going nowhere under that management. So credit for him for sticking there, for trusting the big picture, from learning from Lewis Hamilton, stepping out of his shadow now. This is all, you know, this is rebuilding. This is trusting the process. And now that final step is for him to get a championship contending car and then actually doing that bit as well, because obviously he hasn't really fought for a championship yet in his career. He only has a couple of race wins as well. So that is the last step. But so far, you cannot fault him for anything. George Russell has been 10 out of 10 this season.
Yeah, absolutely love it. But we'll see if you can get a third straight podium, a hat trick of podiums, a hat trick of third places in Suzuka. If he manages that, it'd be fantastic. And he'll keep Mercedes within touching distance of McLaren in that constructors. I think that's the key thing as well, because we all know, it's right to assume that Antonelli will not be getting those regular podiums or stuff, maybe until the end of the season. So if George Russell can maximize as much as possible at the start of the season, until his teammate is regularly up there with him, and maybe they have a better car to help him be regularly up there with him, because they do have a good car, it's just not quite McLaren yet. Who knows, they might be able to really take the fight to McLaren with both drivers, McLaren and Max Verstappen, with both drivers. But now, guys, that's been us. Hopefully you've enjoyed. It's been an absolutely brilliant start to the season. Australia was chaotic. China had storylines, had some decent racing on it. Had Ollie Behrman saying "ciao" every time he overtook someone. That was pretty funny. But no, it's been a pleasure. We're GP Fans Global, and see you next time.
See you guys.